For some of us, it's Valentine's Day! Woohoo! For others of us, it's Valentine's Day. Wah, wah. For some of us, this is a day to gaze into our lover's eyes. For others of us, it's a day to gaze at others gazing into their lover's eyes. For some of us, this is a day in which we receive boxes of chocolate. For others, this is a day when we eat lots and lots of chocolate. For all of us, this is a complicated day. After all, Valentine's Day has come to symbolize, be synonymous with romantic love. And whether we like it or not all of us have romantic love. Now, to be fair, it wasn't always like this. When Valentine's Day was instituted in the year 496 by Pope Gelasius I, good old Pope Gelasius, it was there as a symbol, as a reminder of the sacrificial love of Saint Valentine. What that sacrifice was has actually been lost to history. There are now 3 Saint Valentines in the Catholic Encyclopedia, and so we don't actually know. But we have strayed a long way from the celebration of sacrificial love. Now it has come to simply symbolize romantic love. Now, I'm not opposed to romantic love, trust me, but there is more to life than romantic love. And we miss something when we don't have all of love together. We let go of those things that people really try to celebrate, which is perhaps why Christians have set aside another day to celebrate love. Not just romantic love, but all love. In the context of the grace of God, it's a day that we set aside to celebrate the love and the person from whom it all comes to us. It's a day that just happens to overlap with Valentine's Day. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called Every Day. That's right, friends. As Christians, as a people of faith, we believe that every day is a day to celebrate love, because there is no day in which we are not loved. Whether it's our best day or our worst, we are loved. That's the promise of grace. Of course, we're supposed to celebrate that every day. But sometimes things come up. Other things get in the way, little temptations that convince us our love can wait another day. But if we've looked around our world lately, friends, we know that it can't. And so on this cold morning, on this first Sunday in the season of Lent, on this day in which we celebrate the gift of love, we seek together to clear away those things that tempt us away from love, that convince us they're more important than love, as we hear a story in which the one who taught us to love was himself tempted. First, a disclaimer. This passage for today includes the devil. Dun, dun, dun! That's right, friends. Typically something we mainline Protestants avoid, myself very much included. We don't like to talk about the devil. It makes us feel very awkward. And so we'd rather just sort of breeze on past it, pretending like it's not there. And we have good theological reasons for it. After all, if we believe that God created the world and called all things good, then we don't quite understand how there could be some counter force to that good out there. And so we are tempted to just turn the page, to etch that part out of our scriptures, to move on. And I'll admit that was my first impulse for this morning. But friends, even if we don't believe in a literal devil, there is something in this passage that we would miss if we just turned the page. Even if we believe that the devil is a way of speaking about our conscience, even if we look at it as a metaphor, even if we look at it as a guy with a red spandex suit and a pitchfork, there is something in this passage that we would miss if we avoided it. Personally, I sort of view the devil, the tempter in this story, a little like the volleyball from the movie Castaway. The Tom Hanks character brought Wilson to life, but nobody else would or could understand. And so with that disclaimer, we move into the story itself. This story happens just after the baptism of Jesus, after he has been tempted, after he's heard that voice from God that says, "You are my chosen, the beloved, with you I am well pleased." He hears that promise from God and then runs. And even if we were to stop there, honestly, we would sort of get where he's coming from. After all, we know that as much as we love being loved, as much as we long to be loved, as much as we want to be loved, with that love comes a little pressure. It means the possibility of letting someone down. It means the possibility of disappointing another. Love opens us up to risk. After all, you can't disappoint someone who doesn't care. And so, we get where Jesus is coming from. Some of us can rise to the occasion, and some of us run the other way. In our story, just after Jesus has heard this voice from heaven, "You are my son, the beloved, with you I am well pleased," he books it to the wilderness, where we're told that he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights, a euphemism for a long time. He heads out into the wilderness where he suffers. Maybe we recognize that pattern from our own lives. Sometimes it's hard to be loved. And we're told by Luke that he is tempted while he's out there in the wilderness. He's tempted the whole time, but we hear the last few, just the last few, when he has reached his hungriest, when he has reached his loneliest, when he is at his most tired. He hears these temptations. And if the temptations that came before are anything like the last temptations, then we know some of what he was going through. It was those potentials, that potential for power, that potential for prestige, that potential for self-preservation. We can see that he was tempted by the call to something else, to run away from that call to the least and the last and the lost. He was tempted by that possibility of ignoring the call to love in lieu of something else. And while we certainly know how the story ends, we know what Jesus ends up going, where he ended up heading. Let us not forget that the temptations were as real for him as they are for us. Let us not forget that he had a choice. And with all the gifts he had been given, he could have gone a totally different way. He could have looked out for himself. He could have tried to make as much money as he possibly could. He could have looked out for himself and the people who looked like him and smelled like him and talked like him. We see people do that in our world each and every day, but instead he made a different choice. And so can we. A temptation is anything that keeps us from loving one another. And the truth is that is different for each of us. Sometimes they are big things and sometimes they are small, but friends, make no mistake, we all have them. Every day we will face something that will promise us life if we will only pay attention, if we will only offer our obedience, if we will only offer our time. But in the end, if that thing is not grounded in a deep and abiding love, then that thing will leave us empty. What is it that tempts you? Here we are at the start of Lent, a season in which we typically, as has been the tradition, give up something. And while we have in recent years made it about chocolate or coffee or something else, which may very well be temptations, perhaps this passage is calling us to a little deeper reflection. Perhaps it's asking us to take a long, hard look in the mirror at our diaries, at our calendars, at the way in which we live our lives, and to ask the question, does that with which I offer my time, my obedience, my attention, help me to love? And if not, to let it go. The truth is, some of us at the end of these 40 days will find success, and some of us will not. But friends, the good news of God's grace is that no matter if we find success or not, whether we end in a woo-hoo or a wah-wah, we will be just as loved at the end as we are today. And that, friends, is reason to celebrate. Amen.